All right, well, I'm in Sydney, Australia, and I am joined by Nathan Mitschuinig from Select Plant Australia. Welcome on the podcast.
Thank you, Mark. It's a pleasure to be here, and I really appreciate you getting my name right. So it's always a big thing and a first step to actually pronounce a surname as difficult as mine. So,
it is. Well,
good job.
It ends with a G, and you pronounce it with a C, so
Absolutely.
It's a little bit confusing.
And there is a funny story that a number of people that I've worked with in the industry, I teach them a little song, and if they actually watch this, they'll understand the Mitschuinig song. I'm not going to go into what it is exactly to actually learn how to spell it and pronounce it. But if they do get a hold of this video, they'll know who I'm talking about.
They know exactly what you're talking
100%.
about. All right, little inside joke. All right, well, maybe just to start off with, just want to explain to the audience, like, who is Nathan Mitschuinig?
Yeah, so Nathan Mitschuinig, been in the rental industry for the better part of 20-something years, worked in a number of different rental businesses, and at present, for the last 15 months, been leading Select Plant Australia as the business unit leader. So quite an interesting and diverse role, being nationally based, but definitely my roots are in rental and the business side of things that come with rental.
So where was your first entry point into the industry?
So that would have been at R.O'Rourke in the lovely Wetherill Park depot. Was my first introduction as a yards person. So definitely a grassroots experience. I think, like so many others in the industry, entry-level role, didn't really know what rental was about. So it was always this is interesting. I loved equipment. So tools have always been my thing. You know, people will describe they're a rental person. I'm a tool person. So that side of things always interested me.
So what was your intro then? Like, was there a job in the paper? Was it online?
No, it was actually got referred to a role by a relative who worked at Wetherill Park R.O'Rourke.
Oh, nice.
So that was quite interesting. I was actually just wrapping up Bachelor of Science at uni and thought, what am I going to do with myself?
Let's work with equipment.
Yeah, it's like, do I really want to be in a lab coat for 40 hours a week doing that sort of work, or do I want to be outdoors? And, you know, obviously at that young age, thinking I want to be outdoors. I don't want to be tied up in a lab. It was pretty stark when I thought about it. It's like, do I really want to do that? So yeah, I got a job, and one of my first tasks was cleaning and rolling tarps in the yard. So I think that's probably the version of hazing as it was in the rental industry. Yeah. But then you got the tarp job, and the rest is virtually history, so to speak.
But if you can do all the jobs that nobody wants to do, and you appreciate how hard they are, when you eventually become a manager of some sort, like, you appreciate when someone's going above and beyond. Absolutely.
And I think just even you think about that role, the things you pick up and learn without really knowing subconsciously what you're picking up. You learnt how a machine or a piece of equipment operates. You know, check the oil, the fuel, make sure it starts, all those sorts of things, clean it up, make sure it's presentable. You're learning about branding without even realising it. Well, if this equipment looks good, that's a great customer perception. That's a good experience. It starts with a clean piece of equipment.
Yeah.
You know, there's all those, initial things that go with it.
I've always said that I feel like mechanics can be great sales reps.
100%.
Because they understand the equipment better than anyone else. When they talk to customers and a customer has a technical question, they go into detail about how things work. And I feel like a lot of technicians don't actually understand that or believe it, and they get very nervous when they talk to people. But customers trust them through and through just because they're telling them honest feedback.
Absolutely. You know, when you say that, it's one of the things, there's two people that touch customers more than anybody else in the industry or in any phase of work or with assets, those sorts of things, or a service-based industry, is your mechanics and your drivers. So, and they are definitely the best salespeople that I would think that have so much to offer other than just, the important jobs that they do. And whether it's, again, like you said, with a mechanic, an intricate understanding of the asset or the piece of equipment, how to troubleshoot it. They're the best people to speak to if a customer's having an issue as well, because they know what those common things can be that it can cause some sort of alarm with a client or a customer, and really build a relationship. The driver as well, calling the customer before they arrive, showing up on time, showing them how the asset works, because they're all different. You go to any rental business and there's different levels of or different types of equipment, even though they may be the same category, so to speak, but there's nuances between every single one of them. And if anyone's dealt with demo saws over the years, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah, nice. So, and I guess, do you think most rental companies have that perception where they should train their drivers and mechanics to have that influence? Or do you think that it's the other direction where it's like, no, your job is to deliver equipment on time?
I think it can be both. It depends on which business you speak about or you talk about, but I think it's a massive opportunity for the industry, and also different career pathways. Not every, you see a lot of really good examples of people that have been mechanics that have gone on to lead successful businesses in the rental industry. There's been a couple on this podcast that again started in one role, progressed through. No different, very similar story to myself. Grassroots, understanding the customer, understanding the equipment, understanding the capability of the business that you're working with. So if there's any opportunity that the industry has, and I think a lot of the, what I'd say a private business or the family businesses would probably have a better handle on what that looks like.
Yeah. And I think maybe the way it needs to be put is, all right, if you are a driver or a mechanic and you want to do something else in the future and have a career path in a certain direction,
Absolutely.
like, remember that like all the work that you put into building the relationships with your customers over time, when you change roles, customers don't forget that.
Of course.
And so it's almost an investment in themselves as well. Whereas like the other side of the coin is, no, I'm just a driver and my job is to load equipment, check it all, deliver it, and sign it off. You know what I mean? Like it's...
Yeah, I do. I think the rental industry is unique like that, though. I think people understand whether, you're a driver or a mechanic or a fitter, field service, a TA, that it's part of a service, it's part of a solution. So I really do think that the vast majority would not just see themselves as they're an advocate for your business while they're interacting with your customer. And I really do believe that most of the people, if you spoke to them in those roles today, whether they're a driver or a mechanic or a fitter, they would say that, that they're part of it. It's not just, I just do this. And that's probably one of the differentiating things about the industry as a whole. You very seldomly hear about, it's not my job. I'm just this.
Yeah, and those people don't last anyway.
No, that's right. And that's the one thing, the beauty about the industry. You're in or you're out. Once rental is in, I had a short stint away for 18 odd months, and then I came back. Yeah. Because it's a diverse business.
Yeah. So started as a yardie, got thrown into the mixer straight away. Like, how did your career sort of go from Rec Air?
So from Rec Air, I had a number of different roles if I just went back on Rec Air. So started as a yardie, that didn't last too long. Went into a TA's driver's role. So it really got a good understanding about the equipment, then started delivering the equipment to customers. And then from there it was, I think I was in that style of role for probably only about 6 to 8 months. And then I moved into the hire controller role. So it was quite quick. I started as a hire controller there with Mark Smithwick as my manager. So that was a great time. The Olympics, all the buildings for the Olympics were starting. We had an expansion at Warragamba Dam. I still remember those jobs like it was yesterday. Some really iconic projects that we were part of, and elevated to an assistant manager under Mark, and then wanted to become a sales rep at that point. And I was fairly young and green, I would say, to be a salesperson. But at that point, once I'd achieved all that over the first couple of years, I decided that I definitely wanted to be a salesperson. And I moved to a company called Blackwoods or West Farmers Group, and did a sales rep traineeship with that business. So spent 18 months there, worked through that traineeship, and then came back into rental. I missed the acquisition or the merger of Coates and Rec Air, came in at the tail end. when the culture and all those things and processes were being embedded from the actual merger. So that was probably missed all the juicy stuff, as they'd say,
Sure.
and came in with Graham Quinn and Sid Magna. They recruited me to be a salesperson out of the Auburn depot. So, and it wasn't just the Auburn depot, it was actually Wetherill Park and Blacktown as well. So, but I concentrated predominantly on industrial sort of work. Refineries were big in those days, the One Steels, steel mills. So it was walk straight back into that industrial landscape coming back from A. Baker's, Blackwoods, industrial supplier.
So you said that like you were still young
Yep.
to be a sales rep. Like
Yep.
why do you think that is? Like why do you think a young person would struggle in that role?
I think times have changed is what I would suggest. Age is not a barrier as much as it was back then. If you were young, when you were recruited back then, and this is how I think how far just society has evolved in general, let alone business. If you were a young person with no real, what was deemed responsibility, if you weren't married, had children or a mortgage, they wanted that level of stability to sort of say you were mature enough to move into a role like that. Don't know if you want to put that in, but that was the reality.
Yeah.
And then after I got the experience somewhere else who was willing to put me in that style of role, came back in and...
Yeah, but that's not a factor, yeah? Like
I don't believe so.
I see if someone has the right mentality, the right
Correct.
passion, the right curiosity, they can do anything, really.
Absolutely.
It's just a learning experience.
Absolutely. And look, I think, to a large extent, some of those early things of the late 90s really shaped who I ended up becoming as a leader and as a person who liked to lead people and coach people and how I wanted to treat people. And I've just stayed true to that.
Yeah,
I think that's probably the biggest thing for me.
But I think if you went back even 20 years ago, if someone's manager was younger than them, it would be like a weird relationship.
It was weird. I can tell you I experienced that firsthand. So it's probably a little bit more of my story after becoming a salesperson. There was the amalgamation of the businesses of Coates, the business units. I ended up deciding to become a branch manager. So I moved out of sales after a few years, moved into running a depot at Auburn, so right near the Shell refinery. And I think I was either 25, I think about 25 at the time. So I was running the second largest depot in Sydney from a general hire perspective at Auburn. Had a team of 5 people, and unfortunately everybody was much older than me. So it was, I've experienced that, like I said, firsthand. It was different there, that's I can say. And when I say different, the team just looked at my capability. The ability to lead them, solve problems, treat them with respect. They had a lot of experience. By this stage, what have I got? 5 years of experience in rental or business. Some of those people had 30 years.
Yeah.
So it was about how they could help me be a better version of myself.
Yeah, 25 at a branch manager is pretty young.
Yeah, it was. Well, I like to say I do like to push it.
Yeah. Because you would have been responsible for the P&L for that branch.
100%. Yeah.
There's probably millions of dollars worth of assets that you're responsible for as well. Like 25 is like, how did you sort of manage that? Like, was it always just like you wanted to bite off more than you can chew and then like figure it out on the way, or how did you sort of take it on?
No, I think you see things like, and that was one of the benefits of being a salesperson, aligned to a market in 3 different depots or 3 different geographies in Sydney. You got to see how different operations were run. You got to see what worked, what didn't. You got direct feedback from your customers. You go out and the face of the business and not the driver or the mechanic, with the customer, understanding how their experience was. You got that direct, good, bad, or indifferent. You got that feedback, one-on-one, unfiltered, and you knew exactly, how businesses were being run, and then you seen it. You seen it firsthand when you went to one of those branches or depots, and you picked apart what was great, what you would do. And that's how I always thought about the business. How would I do this differently? How would this, give a different result? That was I always started to think further ahead on how could we do this differently? How could we be better?
Yeah, and I think coming from sales, like one thing that I guess a lot of people in operations hate is when a sales group or a salesperson oversells the solution that they're going to provide the customer, and then ops needs to basically figure it out, yeah? And so then coming from that background and learning the ropes there and then working into the operations side, you've gained the knowledge, and then you can start mentoring your sales reps that report back into your branch.
Correct. And I think it just helps you work cohesively as a team because you actually have a level of understanding and empathy, not only how the business is run, from whether it's cleaning an asset, delivering an asset, getting an asset ready for hire, selling the asset, and then actually closing a sale, doing the paperwork and putting it to work.
Yeah.
You understand the life cycle of that transaction from start to finish. And if something, was to go wrong, their assets, their equipment, sometimes things break down, you've been given that dexterity, is what I'll call it, to how to solve that problem, how to keep the customer at ease, how to say, how do we fix this for next time? How do we be better?
And I liked what you said before as well, like when someone becomes a manager and they come into the situation and they don't think, I'm just going to tell everyone what to do. Like you went on the approach of, I've got like this array of people that have like way more experience than I do. How can I leverage them to help improve me and help the business?
Absolutely. And coming in as a first-time manager in one of the largest branches in Sydney, who'd just come off the road, I have to say, when I reflect on it, the odds were definitely stacked against me. There's always that ongoing battle in between ops and sales within any business. I think that tension, I'll call it. But when you have the understanding of what it's like to do both roles, it makes things so much simpler. Well, in that case, I knew the cycle. So I knew the sales perspective, knew the operational perspective. I knew how it affected me when I was on site. And I also knew how to get things done at a branch level. So it was the P&L I learnt really quick. I had to understand, what impacted what. But again, I'd always been supported with development opportunities. That was not only from a role perspective, but also the tools to do that role effectively.
Yeah. And then how many years were you at Coates?
I think so 19 pushing 20 years was the full block. A couple of years at Rec Air, a couple in between on a sabbatical, I'll call it, from the industry. But that just gave me a different context and an introduction to not only construction. You're always on the peripheral with construction, but you also, from an industrial supplies person or business like Wesfarmers, who ended up being Bunnings, as we all know, and Hardware House at the time. That was quite interesting and eye-opening as well. Same customer base, different product.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yep.
So what was your final role at Coates before you finished up?
Before I finished, I was the regional manager for the Sydney specialists. So I had a couple of different iterations of that role. So did non-mechanical assets, mechanical assets, had a vast array. I think I'd virtually run every style of region that Coates had to offer, whether it was specialist, regional or general equipment rental. So really had a thorough understanding on what made regions operate from both sales and operational perspectives.
And then working anywhere for 19, 20 years, like you almost become part of the furniture.
Absolutely.
Like you bleed whatever the colours of the company are. And some of the people that you work with, you've almost grown up with them.
Correct.
Like you would see them as family. Like when you see someone every day for 20 years, like it's a different type of relationship, yeah?
100%.
So leaving Coates must have been a massive thing then.
It was. And I think the hardest part, as you said, it was the people element. That was definitely the most challenging. A lot of people, I'd worked with for, 20 years, and if not, previously at Rec Air. So, you think about, duration of, nearly 24 years that I knew someone or worked with them. That is a big investment in building relationships and networks as well.
Yeah. So how did you step outside your comfort zone then? Like, talk me through the mentality. Like, obviously the opportunity came with Select Plant Australia. Walk me through that process, because it wasn't something that you just made a decision overnight on.
Oh, definitely not. I think that, regardless of where people sat in the business, a lot of people gave me some really good advice. I've always been an ambitious person. That's part of who I am. I really wanted to think about what was next for me. How could I put the skills that I have and the knowledge and experience that I had into something bigger, or something ready to be developed more than what it currently is. And I thought, realistically, there was only so much I could do left at Coates, which, great business, the people are fantastic, but what could I do with my skills to keep developing? And I think that's one of the things, you listen and hear a lot of things. One thing that I think you may struggle with after 20 years is, what do you do next with your career? Because you come to that crossroads, that's what it is essentially. 20 years in a business, do I continue doing this, or do I try something else? And I think for me, given where I was at in my career, it was time to try something else, and see what else I could do.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, when they work at a place for a very long time, they get comfortable.
Yep.
Yeah, and when they get comfortable, they stop actively managing their career.
Yep.
Yeah,
totally agree.
Which is not a bad thing. You need people that are going to be there. I think there was a guy at Coates that's like 48 years or 49, Jack King, like he's forever. Yeah, the guy's like, it's insane how long he's been there. Unbelievable.
Absolutely.
But and you need those people. Like, they're amazing people within you. But if you want to push yourself to the next level, if you don't actively manage your career, you will be in the same role. You will do the same thing. So I guess you've always wanted to challenge yourself and find that next thing.
Absolutely. I think, the longest time I actually spent in a role in that business was the last role, realistically. And I think that was, 6, maybe 7 years. I'd actually been a regional leader for 12 years at Coates. So, that was a big innings, as a regional manager or a regional leader. That was, I think I was just on 30 when I took over a region.
Wow.
So it always pushed my career, and I think that was the longest time, but I had different iterations of that regional role over that 12 years. I had a Western New South Wales for a period of time, running operations and sales, the general business, the specialist business, both the specialist businesses, it was, and then got to play in a lot of different category plans for things. So really understanding asset life cycle as well.
Yeah. And then, so we'll get to Select Plant Australia. So Coates, I'll put them in the group of a traditional equipment rental business. Select Plant Australia is a little bit different. So maybe just want to explain to the audience, like, who Select Plant Australia are.
So Select Plant Australia is part of the Laing O'Rourke business. We've had a global presence as Select Plant since 1985. Part of the R.O'Rourke and Sons construction business or contracting business. And you just want to flag that that's a business so Laing O'Rourke, as you see it today, started in Ray O'Rourke's garage or mum's garage. So when you say a true family business, it started as a grassroots construction style business, saw the opportunity in 1985 to have its own plant arm and internally supply. And from there, obviously moved to Australia. 2007, Select Plant Australia was initiated in Australia as part of that group, as an internal supply company. So again, really had the opportunity to develop its approach and get share of wallet from one customer. So that's the best way I'd describe it, as opposed to a traditional plant style business or a rental business focused on one customer. But it developed somewhat quite different in the UK. So if you look at the UK Select today, it's 85% external. It's a significant business by any rental company means. Really specialising in lifting solutions or cranes and lifting, and site solutions, so your site accommodation style products. but then they take it to the next step. So a lot of different add-ons and solutions, and I think that's where this business's heart really lies, other than its people, is its ability to innovate, be different, be better consistently. And that's what I think Select Plant is, or Select Plant Australia is. It's a rental business that provides solutions and, really do things exceptionally well for a limited customer base.
Yeah. When I think about all the major contractors, even just around Australia, I can't think of one that has an asset division that manages their own plant the size.
Correct. So, and I think that just speaks to the business itself and how we want to specialise in certain styles of construction projects as well, and construction products. So if you looked at the rail fleet that we have here in Australia, we do a lot of rail work. A lot of people will know that. So Laing O'Rourke itself does a lot of rail jobs. So we have a lot of specialised rail equipment, and not your general rail equipment. So highly specialised tampers, regulators, and cutting edge, leading technology sort of investments that we've made to differentiate. I think that's the biggest thing, where a general rental specialist will want a lot of different things that will mean a lot to a lot of different customers. So I know that's a very broad section of customer bases and market segments, but realistically, we want to be a specialist provider. So, and that's how our relationship works with even the supply chain as well. So, we do use a lot of the supply chain, other rental businesses, to supply a lot of the products that are readily available in the market, where we want to specialise. We want to be different. Yeah. That's what we want to do.
And so what percentage do you rent externally in Australia?
So at the moment, like I said, limited number of customers. We want to continue to specialise in that niche equipment, and I'm sure we'll talk about equipment soon enough in this podcast. But again, we want to do a smaller number of things exceptionally well.
Yeah, very good. So then, 19 years at Coates, opportunity arises at Select Plant Australia through Laing O'Rourke. What made you decide to want to work for them?
There are a few things. So a big thing for me is values alignment. I've got if anyone, again, who will listen to this will know I consistently and unapologetically bang on about two things. Number one is people. Number two is whatever you're selling. Whether it's you're building something, you're renting something, whatever your wares are. They're the two things that make any business great. You get those two things right, everything works out. And that's what this business focuses on. So they had a really strong alignment, met with a number of the directors. It was all about people. So, and that spoke to me directly. For me, everything's about the people. You talk about relationships you build, those sorts of things that make businesses hard to leave. They had those values that were my own values in this business, and it was consistent. The alignment was, I have to say, it was unbelievable. I thought it was actually my mind playing tricks at me at some points. I'm just thinking, how could this number of executives and senior people and directors virtually have the same message consistently, and then other people you spoke to within the team of whether it was Laing O'Rourke or Select, it was exactly the same. Yeah,
it's nice.
It was really impressive.
And so then, what was your role? What's your role today?
So the business unit leader for Select nationally. So again, different to what I was used to. National footprint, you definitely get to understand the complexities of a geographical footprint, working in a regional-based business, where some things are 400 kilometres apart. Now we just might be 4,000 kilometres apart, or close enough to it if you go to Western Australia. But it's that opportunity to grow a business on a national stage, basically.
So maybe just to give the audience a bit lay it down. So as the business unit manager or leader, what are your responsibilities within Select Plant Australia?
I don't know how to really summarise that, but the only way to liken it would be like a it's a traditional GM's role, basically, is the way to describe it. So responsibility for the sales, the strategy, the performance, people development, all the elements you'd think that would drive a business forward is, that's the marketing and communications, a whole heap of different things.
Yeah, so really it's taking on that GM role within the Select Plan Australia
correct
unit. So then renting internally to your own projects mostly, what is the main makeup of the type of assets that you're renting?
So there's a lot, actually. So a lot of vehicles and transportation style work, whether it's trucks, buses, standard vehicles, whether they're hybrid, electric, which is a big part of what we're doing these days. Rail equipment's massive. Cranes and lifting is our two biggest categories, I would have to say, would be rail and specialised rail. That's not standard hand tools for rail, mechanical rail equipment. Like if you need to build a railway, that's the equipment we provide. General, when I say general, excavators, skid steers, lift loaders, telehandlers, all those sorts of things. So a lot of general equipment, but again, focusing predominantly on the leading edge technology, best in class, and really doing things differently with products than the market is.
Yeah. So something that I see a lot where you've got a contractor or a construction company that's just managing their own assets.
Yep.
I noticed that they don't treat their assets as well as a rental company, and they try and prolong the life of the asset way longer than what a traditional rental company would be.
Yep.
Because you've split it out into its own entity and it's got its own P&L and all that sort of stuff, does that mean that the way that you're running the business is you want to run it like a rental company and not have that mentality of just burn through the assets?
Yeah, definitely. So it's all about asset longevity. That's the business element. As much as people will say that they're in the rental industry, they're in business, and any successful business has sustained returns long term. And the best way to do that in a plant-heavy business is to have your assets work better for longer. It's as simple as that. So we definitely maintain our equipment for as long as possibly we can, until what I would say technology takes over and we need to invest in something else.
Yeah.
And having a fleet and business nimble enough to be able to respond to that. I think that's probably one of the big Achilles heels of most rental businesses in the Australian market, is that the length and time that you have your equipment on your books.
Yeah, definitely. And there's a large investment going into the asset books within Select Plan Australia.
Yeah, and I think, investing in, again, things that are different, because there's one thing, a lot of different people could make a lot of different mistakes with a business not like Select. Definitely ambitious to grow, develop, but what can we do that others can't, or others are unavailable or unable to do at that point in time? So I think that's what's driven, our strategy, and, we really want to do reciprocal business with other players in the industry, because we're not going to have the same equipment. That's essentially where I think we're being driven, and I think a lot of that's driven by customers. We at Laing O'Rourke, we do a lot of work for construction, for infrastructure, defence, big infrastructure, road projects, rail projects, and people are actually starting to say, what is different about your offer? Well, we offer sustainable and innovative equipment to help deliver our project, and we manage it. And then when you couple it with a logistics offering, where we manage the whole logistics equation on a project site, so the people can actually concentrate on building on time, in budget, and concentrating on what they're good at.
Yeah, rather than trying to manage other things that aren't
Absolutely
actually part of their job.
Correct.
Yeah, it's like I always think about. I remember someone on the podcast once said that, like, when someone's renting equipment from you, like, they're not thinking about like you all the time. They're thinking about them using the equipment to finish their job. I think a lot of people don't understand that. So it's like, if you deliver something and it's like an hour late, that might have a massive flow-on effect to a whole other trades that are lined up to do a certain piece of work. And so
absolutely,
all that matters is you give them the right bit of gear, you get it on time, and the machine works. That's
correct.
all the customer cares about.
Yep.
You thinking that the customer's like thinking about, oh, I love this gear so much and whatnot. They don't care. All they care, if you can do those three things and build them correctly, obviously,
yep,
then you've got a happy customer.
Absolutely. And I think it's a simple business. And I think that's, when you say simple business, I'm talking about the industry as a whole. So rental is a simple business. It's doing the simple things well. Finding out what the customer wants. Does it actually meet their needs? Get it to them on time in the right condition so it's going to work. Invoice correctly, then they're happy with your service and they pay the bill.
Yeah.
Very simple.
Yeah, it is, isn't it?
It is. And I think we've got to always remind ourselves of that. And I think that's for any business. It's that simple process. And the more complicated you make it, the more opportunity you allow for things to not go as best as they could.
And so just for others that aren't aware of how when you've got a contractor and then an asset arm within that.
Yep.
So when you rent something to Laing O'Rourke's,
Mm-hmm.
one of Laing O'Rourke's projects, you're invoicing the project? Like, how does it work from a cost standpoint on the equipment?
Yeah, so I think that it's treated exactly like a business. So it's we invoice the project and the project pays. We just are a one-stop shop for all their equipment needs, whether it's wet hire, dry hire, different types of solutions. We take away and manage that whole plant element on delivering a project. And now coupled with that logistics element where we actually track, manage, whether it's spoil and waste, overburden, elements coming in, whether they're precast, we manage that whole piece as well. So when you start to think about that, we remove all those productivity blockers, is what I'll call them, from a construction project. So again, just maximising how quick we can get a project delivered, which is what any customer will want.
Yeah, definitely. And talking about sustainability and projects, so I read online that Laing O'Rourke was actually working on a project recently that was completely off-grid.
Correct. So we'd actually delivered that. So that was one of the special moments, I will say. So it was actually, we were recognised as a finalist for the ISC Awards. Well, it used to be ISC or ISCA, now it's ISC. So totally off-grid, hybrid power solution, solar, battery, saving something like 45,000 litres of diesel per annum.
Wow.
And it's reusable. I think that's the biggest thing. I think that a lot of the risk that you think about with doing some sort of hybrid power solution or solar array on a project for site accommodation is, how do you keep using it? Because generally you'd think about them on a house or a structure that's permanent. So I think it's modular. It does the work beautifully. I think that was a great piece of work by the team, and I think that really talks about our commitment to innovation, not only sustainability but innovation, where we just have a willingness to do things differently and have the ability to do it. That's one of the biggest things for Select, is that we have a dedicated team just concentrating on that, on innovation, sustainability, being better at everything that we do. That is their sole function.
Wow. So maybe, I'm sure the listeners are we'll put a link in the show notes so people can go check out the project online as well, but maybe just to give context on the scale of the site. We're not just talking about a small site here. Like what? Maybe just a little context on where the project was and this.
So it's actually still in situ as we speak. So it's the Great Eastern Highway, Kilmarnie, I think near Sale in Victoria. So, well, Eastern Victoria, on the Pacific coast side. Great project, big footprint, probably about site accommodation for 200 plus people, all the amenities. We run the whole thing off solar and industrial battery. So, and obviously with Victorian weather, we had to have a backup generator, but you're able to size it effectively. So I think one of the big things, again, getting back to understanding customer need, really assessing what the customers require. One of the biggest things I think when it comes to sustainability and good decisions when hiring equipment is having the right equipment to do the work. People like to overdo things. And that's one of the biggest things I found, with generators or power rent, is people like a bigger generator than what they actually need.
Yeah, and so when you say that it's reusable, so maybe just give some context to that, because I'm sure the listeners are like, what does that mean?
Yeah, so the solar array is integrated into the actual roof of the buildings. Whether we've used them as a modular concept, as like a pergola, where you can actually, it's fully enclosed, you can actually get away from the weather as that is your roof, so to speak, but it's also integrated into the roof of the accommodation itself. Wow. And it can be transported, reused, because that was one of the biggest risks, I think, and probably one of the reluctance pieces around having a decent sized setup to actually run a fairly large facility like that, is how many of those, containerized solar battery would be able to do it. So we actually integrated use the available space on the roof of the buildings.
Wow, that's interesting, isn't it? Yeah, we'll definitely put a link in the show notes so people can check it out. You talked about sustainability and innovation. So how much investment is going into like electric equipment or any sort of equipment like hydrogen generators, potentially, like whatever it might be?
So look, I think that we have, like I said, we have got a dedicated team just working on that every single day. That is their core function. So we do an extreme amount of work on understanding where the market's heading, all those sorts of things. But one of the biggest achievements that we've had come out of that to date is the 250-ton electric or unplugged crawler cranes from Liebherr. They'll be the first in the construction industry early next year, so after Christmas, depending on when this is released. So for us, that's a significant investment in that style of equipment. We have a large crane fleet as it stands now, but we really want to pivot how we do that lifting work. So that's a really exciting investment. We've just recently purchased 10 2.5-ton electric telehandlers or unplugged telehandlers from Manitou, another great product. I think that just talks about our commitment to shifting the way we currently work and doing things differently to everybody else in the industry, not only in construction but also rental. And
so have you as Laing O'Rourke, as the end customer, what's their response to these sort of things? Are they super excited to get the equipment out there? Have they had much exposure to like piloting some of the equipment?
Absolutely. I think that so we've successfully used those unplugged crawler cranes as an example in the UK for some time. So the technology and the equipment just simply wasn't available in Australia. So that was one of the benefits that we do have, is that we have a UK team that actually gets to test and trial this style of equipment first, and then we get to benefit from that. And then similarly on other pieces of work like the solar and I suppose the battery site solution off grid, they've really taken with that. Yeah, they actually didn't do that in the UK. So that we're swapping. I think that's the benefit of having that cross-hub relationship piece where they're exposed to different products to what we are, depending on the different market conditions, geographical conditions, and we get to benefit from the experience of both.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Yeah, well, like clearly like electric's having a massive play at the moment, and it's growing. I think it's still a few years away before it really sweeps it. But I guess the signs are that all the major companies are pushing it. And when they push it, it just flows downstream.
Well, it's not just that. I think people, particularly construction companies, are really starting to listen to their customer. So the people we're developing and delivering these projects for, they want sustainable options. They want a sustainable project, something that's not going to cause harm further on down the track. And I think that talks to, all the different elements of, social inclusion and all those different pieces of work that is so heavily, thought about these days. So it's a great opportunity.
And so I'm keen to learn a bit more about you as well. So if you were to chat to young Nathan as a yardie, or maybe someone else that's coming up through the ranks, like what advice would you give to them and then the next generation of leaders?
So I think there's a piece of advice that I'd give to both the leaders and the people coming through the business at any level, is that you need to condition yourself to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. I think that's where you see the most amount of growth within not only you as an individual, but also as a team. So if you really want to push boundaries, you have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable.
And how do you manage that? Because obviously some people will say, oh, when I do those sort of things, I get anxiety or get stressed or whatever it is. Like how do you manage those things? Is it surrounding you with the right people? Is it knowing that you can always bounce back and it's just one day? Like how do you manage 100%.
That? I think there's a couple of different elements and dimensions to that. So I think start small. Don't bite off too much too soon. Particularly if you're new into it and you really haven't got those runs on the board, so to speak. Start small, but always think big. Don't be afraid to fail, because if you're not failing, you're not learning. That's a big thing, and you need to definitely surround yourself with the right people. That's critical. You're only as good as the team around you.
Yeah, you just got to put yourself out there. And I think one thing that I've tried to adopt a lot in the last few years is I used to try and work on lots of different big things at once. It's very hard. When you got lots of big goals and you aren't really focused on one particular thing, whether it could be personal or business. Yep. I found that I achieved so much more when I was all right, for the next 6 months, I'm going to have lots of small things I want to work on, but this is the main thing. Yep. I'm going to focus on this. Because, it's almost like you can focus on so much, then you actually achieve little to nothing, or you focus on one thing, and you can actually kick that goal and then use that motivation to get the next thing, the next thing, and the next thing.
Agreed. I think, that's probably a thing that's I've definitely noticed over the last 20-odd years is you have more success when you start with less, as in you may only want to concentrate on 4 things and execute extremely well. Instead of having a plan for 10 and executing 6 at 60%. You're better off picking 4 or 5 things and really executing really well.
Yeah, and then it's also figuring out which of those goals can be delegated, because you can't do everything.
No, that's right.
Nobody can do it, and the person that thinks they can do everything is never going to scale.
That's exactly right, and I think that comes back to surrounding yourself with the right people, the right team, and being as much as a coach as a leader. I think they're both linked to the people you have around you, and develop them as well. And I think that sort of leads into the success piece.
Yeah. And so talking about development, you mentioned a couple of names earlier in the piece. Who are some people that you think have played a big influence from a mentor perspective?
So I picked up lots of different tricks along the way, but I definitely would say there are a few people that taught me things that I've carried with me the whole way. Definitely Adrian Manning is one. Was my leader for a fair chunk of time in a number of different geographies in New South Wales. Definitely very people orientated, and understood the business extremely well. So had a lot of experience to leverage, but really knew how to treat people extremely well. Pete Davis, for sure. I don't know if Pete's been on this podcast, but Pete Davis was a mechanic. Is now the EGM of fleet at Coates. Really pushed and really understood basics, do the basic things really well and execute, but also be entrepreneurial and don't be afraid to be an innovator. So I had one more people control and one try something different.
Yeah. I think on a podcast earlier, I think Colleen Cohen, I'm not sure if you know that name, but she worked at National a while ago, and she was talking about when Adrian was on the counter back then, and looking where he is today and the success he's had. But back to what you said, starting in the yard and working your way up. So like when you look back at the person that was working in the yard and got that referral from your friend or your relative, and then look at the role you're in today, like how does that make you feel?
Exceptionally proud, and grateful, because I think that it's one thing to have desire, but to have the opportunities as well to succeed and grasping them with both hands. So I think that's one thing that's never been off-put by risk. Everyone who knows me knows I love risk. So if it was still a 50-50 call, I'd still grab it with both hands and make it work.
Yeah. And
I think that's, again, that comes back to that. Be comfortable with being uncomfortable, because I've been uncomfortable a lot. And I think that's, all those things, and things that people can't say be done. If people says that something can't be done, I'm the person to show you that it can.
Yeah, I'm not sure which basketball player said it. I think it was, I'm going to say Tim Duncan, but I'm sure it's someone else. But it's got a very famous quote, which then I think Nike or Adidas just put it on all their posters now, and it's called "Impossible is Nothing."
Yep.
And it's such a good quote, because it just captures what it means to actually be fully encapsulated in something, and then not let anyone else's influence affect what you think you can or can't achieve.
Absolutely.
Because the moment that you label something impossible, you've already lost the battle.
It's just work, and when I say it's just work, it's something. I've got 3 sons, and obviously that comes in that comes with a number of different challenges, and as most people would understand. But when you're coaching and leading, even your sons and your children, they say, "Oh, I can't do it." Yeah, it's just work. You break it down, and it's no different when you have a challenge or do something marginal. You simply, or something's impossible, break it down and take the steps, and then just work.
And the other thing that I found, over the years, if you, the saying where, if you're going to write, a bad email, probably leave it to the next day, because you're going to think very differently. The same thing happens with anything that's hard. Whatever you think is really hard on Monday, on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, whatever day it is, your mindset might be completely different.
Different day, different perspective. 100%. Totally agree with that. And I think that one of the biggest learnings that I've had during my career is that perceived time pressure. You really need to unpack that, because something that you may think is incredibly urgent right now may not be. But at that point in time it is, and you may make the wrong decision or the wrong call. It's not saying don't make a decision, timely, but really understand, 1, the risk, and 2, take the pace out of it.
Yeah, I think that happens a lot. A lot of people, they think they have to complete something in a certain time, and whoever's asking for that, or whatever the situation is, they just, "Oh, could you get it done by this time?" And then they're too nervous to say, "Oh, this is actually quite complicated or hard, or I'm not sure, can we extend it out?" And then they just do it anyway.
I always think about that as everyone's a customer. That's whether it's internal, external. Validate, actually understand the need, then sell to your capability. It's no different. That's I think it was one of the other people that have been on here. Everyone's in sales. Whether you're an operational person, doesn't matter what you're doing in any part of your life, you're in sales. You're selling something, and at the end of the day, they need a service from you. Although there's no financial exchange, they need a service from you. Understand, validate, qualify, quantify, all those things, and then it's very clear. I can deliver this by then.
Yeah, no, I do like that. I think Braden Mirren came on the podcast and he said, sales sell the first, and then service sell the rest, and then it's a big team working together.
100%. It's like its own little ecosystem. I think people forget that. Everyone's on the same team.
Yeah, that's it. And then finally, so listening to all that, then how do you define success?
I alluded to it a little bit before. Success is the success of your people. Simple. I don't think if you want to be successful as an individual, if your team, and you're a leader in particular, if your team is successful, that is your success. That's, they wouldn't be successful without the right leadership, coaching, mentoring, all those things. To see your people succeed generally will mean that you're hitting targets, that you're doing what you're obligated to do for your business. I think that's the best way to look at it.
Yeah, I hate when I hear businesses say that they don't want to let someone go because it's going to put a void in their business, but then the person has an amazing opportunity. Like, I feel like that's very selfish for businesses.
If that's true, you've done your job.
Exactly.
That's the way I view it. So if your people are succeeding and have opportunity, for the right opportunity, to move roles, whether internally or externally, then you've been an effective leader, and that's a success.
Yeah, that's definitely, I've always thought that. It's like it's a pain in the ass that you got to recruit for the next 6 months and try and backlog that role. But like, look at what you've brewed in this person, and then they're going to go on and hopefully do the same thing. Where if you like control someone and don't let them progress in their career and whatnot, then you're already like forming like a really negative culture within the organization.
If you keep people at the heart of everything you do, and that includes customers, because customers are people, you will be successful.
Yeah, that's it. All right, Nathan. Well, thank you for coming on the Rental Journal podcast.
My pleasure.